Please join me in the karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he hua, he hauhu, i hei mauri ora. Kia ora, everybody. Well, I declare this council meeting open and welcome to Te Kaunihera or Pōneke council meeting. I will be chairing the meeting as Mayor Whānau is joining us remotely. Please let me or Elise know if you intend to leave the meeting. Morning tea will be aiming for around 10:30, and we're really hoping to try and get through today's business by lunch, because I can see Councillor Opanovich looking at me with eyes of make sure that happens. Because you are going on council business to the FinTech Hui. Kia ora. And actually, I'd just like to give a special welcome to our newish, how many days in, Matt?
I've stopped counting.
Yeah, okay, good. Our new CEO, Matt Prosser, for his first council meeting. So welcome, Matt. Good to have you alongside. Wonderful. Okay, so apologies. Do we have any apologies for today? Kia ora, Councillor Randall. Councillor Calvert for lateness, fantastic. We have Mayor Whānau. Greetings, Lindsay. Anyone else? Councillor Opanovich, are you going to put in an apology if you need to leave early? Yes, and Councillor Opanovich. Great. I then move the motion that Te Kaunihera or Pōneke accepts the apologies from Mayor Whānau, Councillor Calvert and Councillor Opanovich. Can I have a seconder, please? Was that you? Yeah, Councillor Matthews. Excellent, thank you. So I now put the motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1 and against 2. Kia ora, carried. Thank you, councillors. Conflict of interest declarations. Do any members would like to declare any conflicts of interests that they may have in relation to the items on the agenda? I see none. Great. So confirmation of minutes. I move the motion that we approve the minutes of the Te Kaunihera or Pōneke Council meeting held on the 18th of March 2025, having been circulated, that they be taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of the meeting. I'll move. Can someone second, please? Councillor Free, thank you. I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Please, can you vote? Fantastic, that is carried. And there are no items that are not on the agenda. And now we are up to public participation, and we have two groups in to share their kōrero with us today. So for the first lot, I'd like to invite Diana Milne and Shelley Lang, co-chairs on behalf of Youth Council, yay, to speak to item 2.2, the WCC submission to LGNZ on the local electoral forum. Kia ora, you both have 10 minutes. If you would like to finish a bit earlier, then we can ask some questions. Kia ora, over to you.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, councillors. My name is Diana Milne and this is Orana Noble. We're representing the Wellington City Youth Council to speak strongly in favour of the LGNZ lowering the voting age stuff. As many of you will know, the purpose of our advisory group is to advise the council on issues that affect the city's youth so that we can grow a great city where young people thrive and can contribute to the council's priorities. Never before has a submission been so clearly and directly connected to that purpose.
Youth Council supports lowering the voting age for a couple of reasons. The first of that is the Supreme Court ruling in 2022, which many of you may be aware of. For those who aren't, the court ruled that the voting age being 18 is an unjustified limit on the right of all New Zealanders to vote. Therefore, by stopping 16 and 17-year-olds voting in general or local elections, it is a violation of their human rights. Youth Council overall supports young people exercising their democratic rights, whether that is the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and yes, that includes the right to vote, and we heavily encourage councillors to continue to advocate for the rights of 16 and 17-year-olds and support the submission and its advocacy of lowering the voting age to 16.
Yeah, and it's not just about rights, it's about better outcomes for Wellington. Young Wellingtonians are politically engaged. They care deeply about climate change, transport, housing and social justice. Last year, the Youth Council received a record number of applications, far more than we could ever accommodate, which shows a clear desire amongst young Wellingtonians to be involved in local government, but the opportunities to do so remain limited. Most of our youth councillors are under the age of 18, yet they consistently demonstrate a strong grasp of complex local issues and a clear ability to express their views, as I hope many of you will have seen in our oral submissions.
Another point in favour of lowering the voting age is around the strength of local democracy in Wellington. It's no secret to many of you here that Wellington City Council and local elections in general are struggling to engage public participation, with turnout increasingly low. I think it was 43% at the last general election. But there is a great remedy for this in lowering the voting age. Young people are increasingly becoming more involved in politics, whether that is, and that can be seen through the school strikes for climate or the Hikoi Mō Te Tiriti that happened both this year. There are multiple studies that actually show that the younger you vote and the more you are more likely to vote in the future. And by getting 16 to 17-year-olds to vote, we can actually expect to see in the future greater participation in local government elections. What's me again? It's still me. And I guess the final reason why we support it is around kind of the rates argument that a lot of people put in opposition to it. So the argument goes that young people don't pay rates and so shouldn't get a say in how council resources are distributed. This isn't true. It's not true for two reasons. One is that young people do actually contribute financially, whether that is through work and helping pay rates for their family, or they'll pay rent on their flats that they rent. And so we believe that young people that should actually get that the class of 16 and 17-year-olds deserve a right to have their voice heard in how the council resources are shared.
We know that there are some details to work through with your submission, but we don't think it's worth throwing out the idea when one of the core principles is, supporting the right for young people to have their voice heard. So we think that with some amendments, we should definitely support that. Are there any questions?
Kia ora. Thank you, Diane and Shelley. Yes, we have a question from Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much for coming in. Appreciate the time and effort. I'm just wondering, what sort of demographic spread do you think you actually have access to? Like, obviously, you have people on the Youth Council, you have people, perhaps at university, but over the general populace, what do you think your coverage is of people? Because I've had, various different interactions with 16-year-olds as well.
Well, one of the reasons we recruit people on Youth Council is their community engagement. So one of the things we look for is people with a lot of different communities that they do work with. So we only have 20 youth councillors. Like, that is not nearly enough to represent all of the views of Wellington's youth, and we would never attempt to do that. I think it's hard to say what reach we have within the young people, but we do have a good spread. We do recruit based on, the community groups that people are a part of.
Okay. Can I have a follow-up?
We've got a few on the list, Ray, so I'll keep moving around. Councillor McNulty, I'll come back to you.
Kia ora, thanks for coming in today. What do you think is more hazardous to the general populace? A 17-year-old driving around 2,000 kilograms of steel and rubber, or ticking a tick on a ballot box about who they want to represent them in the council?
Well, it's obviously the ticking box, I mean, 16 and 17-year-olds are entrusted with a large array of responsibilities already, and the right to vote should be one of them.
Yeah, kia ora. Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, and sorry, I missed your name. But do you also support civics education in school to go with this lowered age?
Yes, we want an educated populace voting, and particularly because 16 and 17-year-olds are in school, the vast majority are. It provides actually a great opportunity for them to be able to become more informed. However, I don't think that, we should tie making it 16 to civics education. It should be a thing generally and shouldn't be directly tied to it.
We're also very lucky in Wellington. We have an organisation, a not-for-profit organisation called Generation Vote that goes into schools and teaches civics education, which some of you will have spoken for and with.
Nice. Kia ora. Back to you, Councillor Chung.
Right, thanks. My follow-up question is a similar sort of thing, that I find a lot of young people, they're not interested in voting or doing these things because they're so focused on their education at this time. They're looking at what career they actually want, what they want to study at university, and so that seems to be their main focus rather than thinking about civic and local government. So what do you think that we actually need to do to actually, which comes first? Do you educate people in doing things, or do you actually give them the vote first so that they can actually start learning about these things?
I don't see why you should disenfranchise a group of people just because some of them may not entirely think on voting. I mean, in general elections, we have, 20% of the population doesn't vote. That doesn't mean that the rest of the population doesn't get the chance to vote. We believe in principle that 16 and 17-year-olds should be able to vote. Just because, some may not feel like, oh, I'm not that interested in politics, that doesn't mean that the entire class of 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't be given that right.
Great.
Also, as youth councillors, we haven't seen that at all. The 16 and 17-year-olds that we see in Wellington and talk to in Wellington, they are very interested in voting, even though they have other things on their plate like university. They still want the ability to vote.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for your excellent submission. Just curious, do you think also the age for jury service drinking alcohol should also be lowered just to make the rights more consistent?
Well, we wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of Youth Council for those things. I'm going to assume that we aren't supportive of lowering the drinking age, but we can't really speak on behalf of Youth Council on those two issues. Sorry.
Yeah, kia ora. We've come to the end. Kia ora, thank you for coming in. And Arunan, apologies for getting your name wrong at the beginning. And Diana, we love seeing Youth Council at our table, so please come again. Thank you for your submission today.
Thank you very much.
Great. So I'd like to invite Thomas Pope Kerr, Caitlin Taylor and Sage Garrett on behalf of Make It 16 to speak to item 2.2, the WCC submission to LGNZ on the local electoral forum. Kia ora and welcome. I'll hand it over to you all. The mic should work. If you press, get the green button.
Oh, there we go. Much better. Kia ora koutou. I'm Thomas, and we've got Sage and Caitlin here from Make It 16. We have been advocating for this for a long time, and I want to start by thanking many of the councillors around this table for your support of lowering the voting age in the past. It is really important for us. And we've had strong support from across many different councils and many different parts of local government for lowering the voting age to 16 for local elections. And I want to start with that because I think it's important today that this council, and this is the main point that we want to make, this council finds a way to make it work, to craft a submission that a majority of councillors can agree on, bearing in mind there are a number of issues that are covered by this particular submission. Our point is that the Council must craft a submission that includes lowering the voting age to 16 that a majority of councillors can agree on, because we know the majority of the councillors around this table have in the past supported lowering the voting age to 16, and we know that this council in the past has supported it. We want to make sure that this very important issue does get the airtime that it deserves and does get the attention that it deserves within the context of this set of recommendations that LGNZ is putting together. In that context, our proposal is that if the council needs to, that it prioritises lowering the voting age to 16 as part of the submission and finds a way to work around some of those other issues with this submission and work together collaboratively to make that happen. So in terms of that past support, we really do appreciate it, and I want to tell a little bit of a story of how we've gotten to this point. Obviously, we're here talking about this submission because of the future of the review into the future of local government, which supported lowering the voting age to 16. That came alongside a little bit before, but alongside the independent electoral law review, which supported lowering it for general elections as well. In the past, we've had submissions in support to the future of local government review from this council, from other councils, including Dunedin, Hutt, Kapiti, Selwyn, Porirua, a few others. And we want to make sure that that continues because, as was referenced by the Youth Council earlier, this is a human rights issue. We have had the Supreme Court issue a declaration of inconsistency in relation to the voting age for both general and local elections. It's probably important to note as well that the court was unanimous on the issue around local elections, and I think that's a point that's often missed. We had, of course, the bill that was put forward by the previous government to lower the voting age to 16 for local elections. We got very close. We continue to advocate for it very strongly because we do see that there's an opportunity, there will be an opportunity, it will keep coming up, mainly because we're going to keep bringing it up, for that to happen in the future. And we want to make sure that this council lends its support to that, especially because of the growing global trend that has been seen around the world. We've had a number of countries that have lowered their voting age to 16, and the UK is just about to join the list. Some councillors may have seen that the Prime Minister over there has recently reconfirmed that is about to happen. So this council would be supporting a growing and continue to support a growing movement around the world as well. I'm now going to hand over to Caitlin, who's going to talk about some of the specifics of why we support it, and some of the arguments we make, and in particular some of the things around how it can bolster local democracy, where we know we only have 42% of turnout generally, so if we're concerned about young people not being interested, firstly, that's not true, but secondly, most people aren't interested now, and allowing young people into local government is a way to make that happen. So I'll hand over to Caitlin.
Thank you, Thomas. So our key argument is that lowering the voting age will improve voter turnout. I'll start more broadly and just say 16-year-olds can work full-time. They already pay taxes, they already consent to medical procedures, they can drive, but they can't vote. Decisions made today directly impact young people's futures, in the realm of climate action, mental health, education, housing, and more. Excluding young people will actually deepen disengagement. Including 16 and 17-year-olds, however, will build lifelong voters and strengthen our democracy. In Scotland, over 75% of 16 and 17-year-olds voted after the voting age was lowered. Lowering the voting age leads to lifelong habits of voting, and we've seen this through research from Dr. Jan Eichhorn, who's a senior lecturer in the Social Policy Department at the University of Edinburgh. His research showed that 7 years after lowering the voting age, young people who voted at 16 were in fact more likely to vote again in 2021 than those who first voted at 18, showing the long-term benefits of early engagement. Timing matters. 16 and 17-year-olds are still at school, embedded in stable communities and learning about civics. 16 and 17-year-olds are more connected to their local issues. rather than 18 to 24-year-olds, as many of them have already moved out of their city and are preoccupied with starting their adult lives. Being at an age where you are thinking about your future, you cannot vote and decide on that future, is incredibly disempowering, alienating, and frustrating. I'm not surprised that it in fact leads to disinterest, disillusionment, and lower voter turnout. Voter turnout is a serious issue, but lowering the voting age is a serious solution to this issue. It's not an issue that can be just thrown in or thrown out of these recommendations. It really matters to young people, and it will send a message that you do care about their voices if you include this in your recommendations. So ultimately, lowering the voting age is about fairness, strengthening our democracy, and giving young people a real say in the future that they will inherit. We urge you to lead the way for Wellington and Aotearoa and to find a way to put forward a submission that a majority of councillors can get behind, and that includes lowering the voting age to 16. Thank you. Happy to accept questions.
Kia ora for your excellent submission. On the list, we have Councillor McNulty. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. I suppose this just goes more to the LGNZ paper in terms of what they published. So they've tied 4-year terms into a paper that's about improving voter turnout. Do you think that was really an appropriate position to be putting that into, or is that really a separate issue in your view to actually the mechanics we need to improve voter turnout in New Zealand?
I'm happy to take this. So, yeah, thanks, Ben. So the point here, I think, that's important to keep in mind is that we are a single issue campaign. We don't take a position on other issues. That's been an important point for us because young people are not a monolith, and within our own organisation we have quite a range of views on topics like this, and so I wouldn't, to be honest, want to comment too much on where we see that. We do see them as separate issues, and we do think that it's important that this council supports lowering the voting age as it has in the past on its own.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the consistency of law. So lots of rights at 16, but lots of rights also at 18. So do you think that other, like, you know, should you be treated as an adult in the criminal justice system, for example, if the voting age is lowered?
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of these things come down quite a bit to it's different questions about different issues. So it's like certain, like this age for voting, 16, makes a lot of sense for a lot of different issues, including that we have evidence from psychologists that demonstrate that although 16, 17-year-olds may not be as advanced in hot cognition, which can be like kind of split-second decisions, 16, 17-year-olds do have a very similar level of ability to do cold cognition, where you have time to think things over and things like that, which makes a lot of sense for something like voting. In terms of criminal justice system, that's more a question of what is actually kind of a time that is most relevant for rehabilitation and questions like that, that's again, like, you know, we're a one-issue campaign, so we're mostly focused on what is specifically the best age for this specific issue, and other issues, you know, that's kind of outside of our area to, yeah, what makes most sense for those things. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Chung, a very quick one. We have 20 seconds left.
I have 2 questions. Is that okay?
You can go with one question very quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the first question is regarding Scotland changing their laws to allow voting for 16-year-olds. Do you know what the implications of this change has been? Like what change has actually been made to Scottish laws and policies, and what are the implications of these?
If the question is about, and if I'm getting it right, if the question is about the changes in terms of what it's led to, changes in policies in other sorts of areas, to be honest, there hasn't been massive changes, and that's because, again, young people are not a monolith. The point here is not about the outcomes, it's about the process, and it's about making sure that young people are involved in a democracy across the board. Probably worth noting that the Scottish Conservatives initially opposed the lowering the voting age to 16 for the Scottish independence referendum, mainly because they were quite concerned, it appears, about young people in Scotland voting to leave. when that happened, they didn't. It was actually a relative split. I can't remember the exact numbers, but they didn't vote overwhelmingly to leave at nearly the rate that they thought they would, and the Scottish Conservatives came on board after that. And so I think that's a pattern that we can see where young people really do take this stuff seriously and they can see the benefits of this. And when they do vote, they're not a monolith. And so I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind, that this really is about the process and not the outcomes.
Excellent answer. Kia ora. Thomas, Caitlin and Sage, make it 16. Thank you so much for your submission to us today.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Always happens. Great. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move on to general business. And the first paper, 2.1, is the Airport Southern Seawall Renewal Project. Can I please invite or welcome Kate Brown to introduce the report? Kia ora. Over to you, Kate. Ready when you are.
Thank you. So, yeah, Kate Brown, and I'm joined by Sherilyn Hinton, so Parks Planning. Just to introduce the report, the Wellington Airport are planning to renew the southern portion of the seawall at Moa Point, which includes the breakwater, and then to remediate the eroding eastern bank as well at Moa Point Beach. The airport owns the seawall, and they are required by consent notice to protect the land from erosion and inundation. So there's a responsibility to the airport. The seawall is located partly within and next to two council-owned Esplanade reserves, and the airport is requesting to use these reserves during their project and for ongoing access to be able to maintain the seawalls. The project is listed in the Fast Track Approvals Act, and that Act enables a streamlining of various approvals in a one-stop shop, including Reserves Act approvals. For Reserves Act approvals on council to be given under the legislation for council-owned reserves, the council must provide written agreement for the use of the reserves. And so, basically, if council does not give that written agreement, then that reserves approvals can't be processed through that one-stop shop, essentially. The legislation also stipulates that council cannot reasonably withhold its written agreement for the use of the reserves. And in deciding whether to provide that agreement, council must consider the purpose of the Fast Track Approvals Act and any relevant matters under the Reserves Act. So the paper today provides information and advice to assist council in its decision making on whether or not to provide its written agreement. The paper recommends that written agreement is given. And if there's any questions, we are here to answer them. We have some airport representatives as well for any questions that may be technical project questions as well.
Right.
If you would like that, if it would be okay to invite them up.
Kia ora, Kate. I'm sure something might pop up. Councillor Pannett is the first for the question. Thank you.
Thank you for that and for answering our questions. 4 years ago, you'll be aware that there was differing explanations of whether it was going to be a seawall or a runway extension. Can you just confirm it is definitely for the seawall?
Yes, I can
know you said
confirm
it.
it's definitely, it's definitely for the seawall, yeah.
And why has there been a change about who's going to pay for it? Because they wanted a loan 4 years ago.
It's a different wall.
So what's the difference?
It's a different place.
It's no extension.
No. I'm asking why we're not being asked to provide a loan this time.
So there is a consent notice that was put on that the airport is required to maintain and renew the existing seawall. So just the existing one, and I'm assuming that if a new one was being built in a different location, that's a different level of investment, different thing.
They'd want a loan in that case.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
Got 2 more questions. Can I go back on the list?
Councillor Free and then Councillor O'Neill.
Sorry.
So the paper talks about either a licence or an encroachment or a something or other. Can you explain the difference, and would we be expecting to have some financial recompense in any of those situations?
So a lease is exclusive use, and so that would be to fence the area during construction for health and safety purposes. So that's what a lease would do. And then either a licence and or an easement to provide that access for the rehabilitation. So after the construction period, just to give them the right to go and make sure that the penguin habitat is all being set up, and then also for access. So we're just not sure whether a licence or an easement would be best just for that access ongoing to be able to maintain.
Can I ask another question, because I'm still not quite sure?
Certainly, Councillor.
Are you talking about a lease for a limited time and then it converting into an easement or a whatever?
Yeah, so it would be, yes, exactly right. Yes, so it would be a lease for 5 to 7 years just for the construction period, and then after that it would be a licence or an easement for the, take the fences down and give them the right to be able to do the rehabilitation and access.
Can I ask again about the money? Would we be expecting some financial sort of consequence here?
Yeah, I think that would be fair for us to request that. Yeah,
Okay.
for that to be considered. Yeah.
It's not specifically in the paper, so I wanted to ask that question. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Free. Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora tātou. I'm conscious this is one of the first applications we've seen on the fast-track legislation. What mana whenua oversight or monitoring is either being folded into this process, or is there breadth for either the airport or the panel to kind of consider?
For the whole project in general?
Yeah.
There has been some consultation already. Would it be okay to invite the airport to talk about where
Most
that's
welcome.
at to,
Most welcome to the table, yes. Thank you.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, come. And thank you. We'll need you to use a microphone as we have people online and we're being recorded. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, ko Paul Beverley tōku ingoa. So my name is Paul Beverley. I'm a partner at Buttle Finlay. I'm assisting the airport team that is also here. Just in relation to the question about from the councillor about mana whenua. So there's a very good relationship between the airport and mana whenua. There have been on-site meetings with both Taranaki Whānui and Ngāti Toa, and they are closely involved in this process. Also, through the fast-track legislation, there's a requirement to engage directly with mana whenua for the panel to do that. So, they will have a right to speak, to make comment directly to the panel. But in the last few weeks, there's been site visits with both groups, and they've been walked across the site, and have been very, very positive engagement. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
I just had a question about an answer you gave to one of my questions around the ability for the seawall to withstand the impacts of climate change. You used the word conservative scenario. Do you mean, sorry, conservative?
Can I ask the specialists
Yes.
in seawalls?
Okay, thank you.
You're also welcome to use the lectern if that's more comfortable. But
Kia ora, I'm John Houth. I'm the project manager for Wellington Airport. And the question was?
Yeah, just the answer to my question says the upper bound conservative scenario set out in the IPCC 6th assessment report. So my worry is that it won't be robust enough, given we don't know entirely the trajectory of climate change. So when you say conservative, do you mean conservative as in the minimum, or conservative as in we're really worried and we'll
really worried. We've been very conservative in this. This process has been taking us about 3 years. We've engaged, obviously, Becca as our main advisor on that, but we've also had advice from Professor van der Meer in the Netherlands, and it's been reviewed by Tonkin Taylor. We've taken the view is that no one knows what climate change is going to do exactly, but we're assuming it's going to take the worst case scenario. So the 2080 sea level we're going for, but we're also allowing within that ability to actually build on top of that again for the future if it actually gets worse and need to extend the life of the seawall.
And I presume you see that the airport has a role in mitigating the impacts of climate change as well?
Yes.
Okay. And the last question I had just was around the relocating of the wildlife. I just was a little bit nervous about that. So which experts have you employed? And have you talked to Forest and Bird and Doc and just to make sure that it's done within best practice?
No, there's a number of wildlife that we've got to look at. The key one is the penguins, and we've got Dr. John Cochrane advising us on that. And we're also engaging with a Taranaki whānui, Charlie Rudd, who's done a lot of work around penguin renewal on Te Ara Tapua.
Kia ora. I'm going to go back to Councillor O'Neill after I didn't see her trying to answer.
No, I thank you. If the ecological values of the process and the project are so important, why wouldn't the airport pursue the standard consenting route given the site's ecological significance through the normal RMA process?
Just invite the airport planner to talk about this choice of theirs.
Lester from the airport. We're going through the fast track process. We originally started to prepare our consent application as if it was going to go through the full normal resource management process. The Fast Track Act came into force and it allowed us to go for approvals through the Resource Management Act, Reserves Act, Wildlife Act, and Heritage New Zealand Act, all within a one-stop shop. So that's the main reason why we're going through the fast track.
Cool. And my just on with that, kind of around the restoration post-construction, what kind of assurances can be made either with the council, because it is classed as reserve land, or Taranaki whānui about the restoration and management? Are there any solid commitments or things that you might be bringing to the expert panel to guarantee protections around there?
It'll probably be like conditions that we'll be putting forward in our consent application.
Do we have an idea of any of those conditions at the minute?
Not at the moment, because we are still finalising. We haven't finalised all our expert assessments, and through that we'll be looking at conditions that we might be putting forward into the application.
Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
My question is, how are you planning to fund it? How much it's going to cost first, and how are you planning to fund it? Are you asking shareholders to contribute, or are you looking different methods?
It's paid through airlines. So not the council, not shareholders.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could maybe clarify for us, because there has been a bit of confusion about the various seawalls the airport might be looking to either remediate or install. I think the question my colleague asked might have been relating to the western seawall. But is there any way you can clarify a little bit for us what seawalls we're actually talking about? Yeah.
Yep, sure.
The question was which seawalls we're looking at. Obviously there's the eastern area, the southern seawall, the breakwater, and the western seawall, and they all form and protect the airport. We started this project looking at it in its entirety, but we quickly came to the conclusion that this is a two-stage project. The main seawall, the one that takes the brunt of the waves from the south, is the southern seawall, and that's probably in the worst condition based on our expert advice. So we've decided to attack that first, and that's our critical one. There's also the question that we have to consult with the airlines on this. This is a significant project, and this is going to take probably 15 years in its entirety. So before we can start, we've got to talk to the airlines, and it's about affordability. So that's why we're looking at doing it in 2 bites. The Lyell Bay breakwater and the western seawall are part of the same unit. So what we do on the Lyell Bay breakwater may depend on what we do on the western seawall and vice versa. And we want to understand what the impact of what the southern seawall, the more robust structure there, what would that do to the breakwater and the western seawall? So that's why we've gone for a 2-stage project.
Thank you. My other question is probably more for our staff. Thank you very much, John. There was mention that there might be a financial recompense for some of this, but we haven't got any assurance that that process is going to take place. Like, it's not mentioned specifically.
The Act allows for it, yeah, the recompense.
Is there any way for us to put an amendment that says that we would direct you to actually seek some financial recompense? Or is it just going to happen anyway?
Or a lease.
Yeah.
Well, it's under the Reserves Act, so I would, there is the ability to do that. That is expected.
But that's not providing me with an assurance that that's actually the process that's going to take
Can I
place.
ask you to come and explain how that works?
Yeah.
Lawyer.
Sorry about the chopping and changing. Thank you, Councillor. So it is very orthodox, as the councillors will be aware, under the Reserves Act, if a lease or licence or easement is granted, that for there to be a fee, a licence easement lease fee paid. The Act provides for that, and that is something that will be part of, as we go through the application process, if we do with the fast track panel, they can impose that as a condition. It's certainly something the council can ask for too in its consultation, because it's the panel has to consult with the council over this application as well.
Oh, so this approval we're giving now is more of an in-principle approval. It's not the final deal.
Oh, so the actual assessment of whether a lease or a licence or an easement is actually granted is that's up to the fast track panel, expert panel, to make that do that actual approval. So all we're doing here is saying that, recommending for you to agree that the fast track panel can make an assessment and decide to grant or not to grant the approvals.
Are they also the ones that decide on any financial recompense?
Yes, and we get to make submissions for them to consider, for the expert panel to consider.
Okay. This is going to happen without any further input from us or any further...
So we wouldn't be the decision makers, but we can make... there's different points where we can make submissions to the panel to consider our views, including fair compensation.
Councillor Free, I'll allow Matt Prosser to step in.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll answer in reverse order. So the last question you're talking about, recommendation 5 says that council does have the opportunity to provide comment and recommend conditions that could be imposed for any Reserves Act 1977 approvals through the consultation process. So council will have an opportunity to make comment through that process. The piece around agreement of costs around the lease and licence, you're delegating that to me as Chief Executive. I've heard that, and I will ensure that costs are recovered as allowed under the Act.
All on record. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. We've got 2 more questions, and councillors, I'd just like to encourage you that we're staring at morning tea, so just if we can move on, when we're comfortable that we've got the information we need, that would be great. Councillor Brown.
Could you just confirm that Wellington City Council is actually going to be saving a very large amount of money and having the airport actually do the seawall protection, which of course is protecting our road and our sewage pipes? So we gain an enormous benefit because the airport is actually shouldering all of the costs associated with improving the seawall.
Yes.
And also, sorry, one other question. My second question is that would any charges or any costs that we impose on the airport will then be transferred to airline passengers as under the aeronautical pricing regime?
Crikey. I can answer the first one, if I can get back to the first one. So there are benefits to council in terms of protecting the reserves themselves, protecting the roads, the road, and protecting the pipes. And those protections are, the seawall isn't a cost to us, but we do get, get those benefits. Yeah. And then the second question.
I can add a bit to that first question as well. In part of this project and the design we've developed to ensure that this project works most efficiently for the southern seawall, we're actually extending part of that protection over into the land that actually protects purely Wellington City Council land where the Moa Point outfall is, so there's an additional benefit to the council there. So the answer to the second question, all these costs are recoverable through the airlines, through airline charges, and hence that's why we have to consult with the airlines.
There we go.
Councillor Calvert, thank you. Last question.
Yeah, look, it's just I just really want to clarify because it was similar to what Councillor Brown was asking. But my sense is it would be quite churlish if we actually wanted to put costs on, given that a number of our assets of value are being protected. I'm asking it just seems that because you haven't put it in the paper, that why would we add costs on when we are getting a benefit already in terms of things being protected, our own assets being protected?
So I think that it's fair that we get our processing, our time paid for. So that would be the similar for any application that we got for a reserves approval. We can charge for our time, officer time, legal costs and things like that. And then in terms of the fee, so we often that gets looked at what benefits are we getting, what improvements are we getting that weren't there before, and then we just sort of might do a bit of a balancing act. That's how we'd normally do it.
Yeah, because I think it would be good to see a balancing act. Thank you.
Great. That is the end of the questions. Can I thank the airport team for coming in? That's been really helpful today. And thank you, Kate and Sherilyn. And I will hand over to Councillor Free to move the paper. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Free?
For this particular paper, I haven't asked anybody.
You are the ward councillor, so we have Councillor Calvert. Councillor Calvert will second for
All right.
Yeah, kia ora.
Well, obviously we have to have an airport, and I think that's fact is well established, and the airport does need to be safe, and we need to make sure that the land at the southern end of it is well bolstered, because that's where we can get 9 metre, 10 metre, whatever metre waves coming at us, coming at the city with considerable force. So this work does need to be done. There's a bit of history tied up here in who owns which pieces of land, and I think there is an argument to be made that this is to the benefit, a wider benefit of our city. I know that there might be a different argument when it comes to some of the other walls, but for this one, it seems pretty clear the airport has undertaken to do this basically at their cost. I still think it's worth being clear on the process, and particularly the process by which we might or might not charge some compensation for the lease and what that amount might be. I don't resolve from having considered those necessary clarifications. I also would like to say I've heard a bit about this. The airport's been very good at communicating this to the community. So I was at a meeting of the Strathmore Residents Association where there was a very fulsome presentation on the actual technology. And it's exciting technology. It's great big hulking concrete, specially designed concrete revetment pieces that will lock into each other. They are huge. They're being made in Otaki, which I think is another thing that we can celebrate. They're being made in our region. They're being trucked down 2 at a time. I was quite surprised it's going to take 4 years, but that's the scale of project that we're dealing with, and I think it's something to be celebrated that the airport has got to the point of, getting into the details with this and getting to the point of actually getting through the legal process and the consenting process. So I'm very happy to move this paper, and I'll hand over it for debate.
Thank you, Councillor Free. Councillor Calvert, would you like to say anything as seconder?
I support this. We need a resilient airport with a capital city. and we shouldn't delay doing this work. And personally, I wouldn't like to see, given we're spending over $400 million on building a sludge minimisation plant on Moa Point, we've got a significant amount of assets, including the road, and I would like us to ensure that we are not. We're getting a seawall for free, basically protecting our assets, and any charges for processing should perhaps be thought about being written off, because I think we're getting a good end of the deal here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're moving into debate. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. So, look, I will support it because it's clear that the law says that we have to have good reason to refuse. And probably at this point in our history, a seawall is the best practicable method to protect the airport. But I think, Councillor O'Neill, your question was pertinent. I obviously oppose the fast-track legislation, and I think we need to be really careful about, even though this might have some good environmental benefits, it's still bypassing some of the other protections that we usually put in place to support nature. And so I do think that we need to keep asking hard questions about the protection of the wildlife through this. It's going to be a long-running project. I am thrilled to hear that the airport believes that it has a role in mitigating climate change, because every time we have some issues, it's always like more motorways and we need to extend it and we need to increase the number of flights, and they haven't pulled their weight there, and that does need to happen. I know they're trying to make the ground operations more sustainable, but really that's not where the big wins are. At the end of the day, we just have to stop flying as much as we do. And just, I guess, look, I'm glad they're taking a conservative approach on sea level rise, but, we are dealing with nature. Nature will follow its own pathway. We've already, baked in a level of sea level rise, which is frightening. And so I guess just we will need to keep, future councils will need to keep a close eye on it. But look, it's doing the responsible thing. We need to protect our cities, so it should go through.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Pennant. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak, I guess, as one of the local councillors for this area. I will be not supporting the recommendation of this paper today. This is the first time we are seeing the application of the fast-track consents bill in action in Wellington. It's fast-track, but it has long-term consequences, and I see a duty of care to our taonga, to our mana whenua and iwi partners, to ensure that korora and mokomoko habitats, which are the little blue penguin and the lizard habitats in this area, are taken care of. And I do believe, I can support the project and I support coastal resilience for the seawall, but I don't support removing our ability to properly scrutinise and influence how it's done. And I just wanted to be really clear with my colleagues around the table that the opportunity to provide feedback through fast track is not the same as the RME process, where they have an obligation legally to make recommendations after engaging with the public, iwi and environmental protection rights. And there's also a part of that process that is the appeal. I know the purpose of this legislation is to cut red tape, but I do think we need to be careful, especially when we are dealing with the Reserves Management Act and the ecological sensitivity of this area. I've had yarns with different people and the iwi and local residents over the years. They're very, very impassioned, I guess, about the native species, and we've talked about this before. But to that degree, I just wanted to signal my opposition. I wasn't going to speak today against, but I was encouraged to, quote, speak for the trees. But yeah, just to raise that flag there. And if this paper does go through, I would be looking to our council representation to ensure that we do protect korora and taonga species, we do embed mana whenua oversight and decision-making and monitoring, and ensure that any temporary use of the reserve land results in real post-construction restoration. So I just wanted to share my views on that today.
Yeah. Councillor Matthews.
Very briefly, I do want to thank Councillor O'Neill for your comments. I will be supporting this, But I guess I just want to very cheekily comment, given the timeliness, and if anybody who's listening from the airport has an influence over this, the spirit of kind of partnership for good outcomes for the city, that we do this, it would be great to see the airport rethink the notable designations, obstacle limitation surfaces from the district plan, which would be a major inhibitor to apartment development in the city. So anybody's listening, it would be great if you could reconsider that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews, for what needed to be said. Councillor Free, can I take, would you like a right of reply? Oh, sorry, I will just pull back. Councillor Randall, would you like to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on Councillor O'Neill's comments that, we should vote against this because we don't like the legislation under which it's done. This is really about the airport and about, their need to protect what is a valuable asset, but also that we also get an enormous benefit. The airport's come to us and said that the southern seawall is under threat, it's in bad condition, they want to act and move quickly, and if they've chosen the legal means of fast track, then that's absolutely their right, and I'd rather focus on what we can do as a council to make sure that the ecological protections we all want are put in place, and in terms of debate, and officers are listening, and the airport's listening closely. The airport has a long track record of being a very positive partner to the city. Yes, having an airport in the middle of a city has got some disadvantages, got some enormous advantages as well, and I'd also note my daughter's going to fly off overseas from that airport on Friday, so I want to make sure that we are an equally good partner with the airport to reflect the investment they've made, both within their local environs and also that they've had a good track record of working positively. And if we need to put special conditions in, whatever, that can be part of the lease. There are other mechanisms, and I ask officers to seek those rather than, and I do ask you all to support it because I think this is a good step forward. And the city will be better off for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Councillor Free, would you like a right of reply?
Yes, just a couple of things. Yes, was completely irrelevant, really, Councillor Matthews, but I actually support you. I do think that what was it called? The envelope that was brought to us for consideration is going to really potentially make development more costly and unnecessarily so. So I do ask if there's a way of looking at that. It would be great. The main thing I wanted to reply to was really on the environmental restoration point, because this isn't the airport's or City Council's first rodeo in this respect. We took a very scruffy, rubbish-laden stretch of road on the seaward side of Cotman Drive and turned it into something that's actually beautiful, and we know for a fact that korora are nesting there. We know that lizards are starting to repopulate the area. That was a huge amount of work undertaken with the University of Wellington, Victoria University of Wellington. Expensive work as well, but it was done with care because it mattered. And more recently, the airport, we had to work with the airport to take away a hillock. That was so that we could build our new sludge minimisation plant. Again, that involved transferal of lizard species. And I know there's been a lot of work done by the airport to make sure that they're guardians of the environment to the extent that they can, which is compatible, obviously, with aircraft operations as well. So I think I've got to say this isn't their first rodeo, and I have every confidence, actually, that they'll work in partnership with the council and with local iwi to restore the area to something we can all be really proud of, hopefully even better than it was. So that's really all I want to say is in right of reply. I do urge you to support this. Not to do so would actually, I think, be a sign that we are not doing not helping the very necessary things that need to happen. This is a city. It needs infrastructure. Sometimes that's actually important, and it needs to be done efficiently. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Free. So with that, I will now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. So those in favour, please press 1, and those against, press 2. I declare the motion carried. Right, councillors, you are amazing. Look at us go. We've got 1 minute until 10:30, so I think we'll take morning tea now. I understand there's an amendment from Councillor Brown, which looks rather lengthy, so I would like it if we could all take some time to have a look at it during our break, and we'll take 15 minutes. We'll just come back at 10:45. Welcome back to the table. So we now have the WCC submission to LGNZ. Oh, my phone's recording me, no thanks. On the local electoral reform. And thank you, Officer Naylor, for being at the table. And we'd like to ask you to present the report, please.
Thank you. Long-time listener, second-time presenter. Thank you. I'm here to present the submission on the draft position paper from LGNZ on local government electoral reform. This is a position paper that has been instigated by LGNZ, developed by a working group made up of some local mayors as well as legal scholar Andrew Geddes, looking at making changes to both the administration and law around local government elections with the aim of finding ways to improve voter turnout. And the instigation of that is that we have seen a very steady or broadly steady decline in voter turnout for local government elections over the last 2 decades. And that presents quite an existential problem for local government. Nationally, we have 42% voter turnout for local government elections compared to general elections being in around the 70%. I'm pleased to say in Wellington City, if you look at the last election, we had 45.4% voter turnout, so higher than the national average, which may be due to perhaps a more politically engaged city, and also perhaps the good work that our democracy services have done in promoting and running the elections. But nevertheless, it is far lower than general elections, and we are not immune to the forces which are kind of behind, both nationally and globally, declining voter turnout. So this draft position paper makes 20 recommendations. I won't go through them all. The submission that is drafted here on behalf of Wellington City Council agrees with the majority of those recommendations in the paper, but perhaps with 2 key differences that I will highlight for you. The first of all being proposal, in addition to civic education for young people in schools, that we also propose that LGNZ advocates for the lowering of the voting age to 16 years old. That is in line with the Wellington City Council Children and Youth Strategy, which proposes that the council advocate for lowering the voting age. And also, as we heard this morning from some of the young people groups here, addresses one of the key issues which the LGNZ draft position paper notes, which is that there is an existence of a social norm of non-voting amongst some families and some communities. And civic education at school, as well as engaging with those young people and enrolling those young people, is potentially a way of breaking that kind of perhaps intergenerational habit of non-voting and building a good voting culture going forward. And you can see the potential benefits of that from the example of Scotland, as we heard this morning. The submission takes a neutral position on the proposal from LGNZ to support shifting to a 4-year term. There are many different views about the benefits or not of a 4-year term, but primarily that the main focus of this draft position paper from LGNZ is intended to be on improving voter turnout, and it is not clear that the 4-year term, while it is a kind of a current discussion with central government, obviously, it's not clear that it has a direct correlation to voter turnout, and so we're just taking a neutral position on that and the other measures around it. So that is all I have to say on that. I am happy to take any questions as best as I can, and also have had some, while it's been drafted by me in the Mayor's office, I'd like to thank Jen Parker from Democracy Services, who has had some input, and just making sure that from a kind of a factual kind of point of view that if it's all correct. But she was also happy to help answer questions.
Thank you, Officer Naylor, for your excellent introduction. We will now move on to questions. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for your work on the submission. Just wondering whether actually the issue of people not voting is a different issue, that people have decided not to vote. They don't want to vote for because they don't have confidence in the processes or the institutions. So do you think that what the work that LGNZ is doing will actually address that?
Yeah, I mean, they broke it in terms of the reasons for non-voting, a few different things. I mean, there is one of the key reasons people give is that they do not know enough about candidates and have to feel confident in making a decision. And so you'll see there, under, I think it was issue 2, there was a range of actions there to try and improve information about candidates. That was one main reason. The voting methods was another reason. And so I think when you look at the issues there and the proposals to shift from postal voting, which particularly in rural areas, I think is becoming more of an issue as postal, services decline, but also as people kind of have less of a habit of using post, to shift to how the general elections do it, which is, more in-person voting and the kind of accessibility of that. Was the kind of rationale behind that. And yes, I think to your point about people just not wanting to vote or not having a habit of it, and I think that's kind of around the civic education part of it is part of, hopefully, part of addressing that. I think there's probably, as you can see from the recommendations, there's no silver bullet to any of this. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much, Michael. I went to a school just recently to talk about voting and elections and the importance of it. And it seems to me that some schools are very well educated about the advantage of actually voting and what it actually means to them, whereas a lot of other schools aren't. So do you think that this is something that we should be aiming at actually doing before putting a submission in to put a blanket sort of remit to actually do this?
I mean, under the LGNZ draft position paper, a kind of standardised, consistent way of civic education in school was one of their recommendations. That falls under kind of draft recommendation 2, primarily. And, LGNZ has previously kind of not taken a position itself on lowering the voting age, but has been really clear that if there was to be a lowering the voting age, their view is that that should be accompanied or in advance by civic education in school. So to your question, whether or not, some consistency and resourcing around that would be, go along with that, I think that's a good idea. I mean, the submitters this morning felt that as a legal right, it shouldn't be a prerequisite, but it would certainly make sense to provide the civic education alongside a lowering of the voting age, I would have thought.
Certainly. You can have another question.
Okay. You put down here that you think that the Electoral Commission should actually take over running these elections. What do you think the advantage of them doing the elections over the council did? Is there something that the council was actually not doing that you think the Electoral Commission can do?
So this was a recommendation from the LGNZ working group, was that Election Commission to take over running of elections. I don't think that was intended as any comment about the quality of how local government elections have been run by councils to date, apart from to say that obviously you have numerous different councils across the country with different ways of doing it, perhaps different standards. But primarily it was about trying to get more people voting to have the consistency of how Election Commission does it, to have the same branding, to have the same resourcing behind it. Well, the idea behind that being that will help improve the voter turnout.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Randall and then Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about the process. I note it was drafted out of the Mayor's office because some of the recommendations were deemed to have more of a political lens. So I was wondering, was there any councillor workshop or meeting with all councillors about the submission?
No.
Okay. Did councillors get a view of the submission before it was actually issued in the papers, before it went public? And if not, why not?
No. It was shared with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor beforehand, but not with councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Calvert.
Thank you. And given our submission addresses some other stuff that's didn't come from LGNZ. Have we, as part of this, did we look at, in particular, our own council, what we could do now to improve voter turnout at all? So more specific to our own council. So I'm just thinking about the information that we provide at the moment. Can we make that better as a review on that? Was that considered?
I mean, given that the LGNZ recommendation, which the submission supports, was to shift away from councils running their own elections to have the election commission done it, that wasn't something that was investigated. It'd probably be a separate matter. Jennifer Parker, if you have anything to add to that in terms of how you review elections as we go each cycle, then welcome to have anything to add.
Sure. So after every election, we review how we, delivered those elections compared to other councils. There's a debrief that happens nationally where all the people like me who run elections come together and talk about what worked well, what didn't work well across the country, which I presented at, particularly around our success in a number of areas, including youth engagement and the ballot bin usage. We look at internationally. So as Michael pointed out, across the world, this is, our rate of response in local government elections really is mirrored across the entire world. So whether that's England, whether that's the US, everywhere where it's not compulsory, and even obviously in Australia, for those that are familiar, local government voting isn't compulsory. So we have much higher turnout, and I've had many conversations with people elsewhere about how to raise their turnouts to our levels. So that is, that's undertaken across the board. Naturally, we always want to be looking to increase turnout.
Thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Michael. I'm just trying to look through the letter and the recommendations, and if one supports one of the recommendation, not the other, what option is there? Because it looks like the letter and the recommendation itself is formatted in a combo way. You either vote the whole thing or no.
I think probably it's difficult when you've got 20 different recommendations to respond to in the submission itself. I think probably the best mechanism, if there's one that you don't support, is to put up an amendment to seek to change that. Would be the best mechanism.
Great.
Okay.
Yep.
If you haven't received any feedback for the fact that, as you said, you confirmed it to Councillor Randall, you haven't shared it with other councillors in advance, what is the basis to recommend, especially the voting change from paper into in person instead of doing all together, the three online, later also in person?
The basis was that it supports the recommendation in the LGNZ election paper.
Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, I just wanted to confirm a point of the process. So, Michael, can you confirm that after about an hour discussing this submission on Tuesday, that significant amount of change has been put in the form of substantive amendments to this paper to take into account councillors' views?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Randall, then Councillor Matthews.
Can you confirm that the amendment process didn't involve workshop or with all councillors or any all councillor discussion?
No, and I think many submissions don't have workshops on them prior to that, and this was judged as a relatively low significance submission.
Councillor Matthews and Councillor Brown.
Can you confirm, Officer Naylor, that this is actually, while done by a different person, very similar process that we follow with all of our other submissions, that they are drafted, shared with the chair and the deputy chair, and then go to a committee to vote on?
Yes.
Brown, then Councillor Calvert.
So what happens with my amendment? When is that?
That is a process question, Councillor Brown. So I will move the paper when all the questions have finished, and then we'll go into debate, and you can bring your amendment at that point. Councillor Calvert, over to you.
Can you confirm that normally submissions are, of this nature are written by the outside of the Mayor's office, and that this is an unusual occurrence to come from the Mayor's office? Staff?
Yeah, last year when we made a submission, well, the LGNZ remits, that was also done through the Mayor's office. So that's, I'm not sure in prior terms how that's been handled. There was a discussion amongst, I think all councillors were there, it was a meeting up here, I think, after a workshop on Wellington Water, where this was discussed and that we wanted to make a submission, and I think it was broadly agreed, but not in a formal way at the time, that given the nature of it, it would be better handled through the Mayor's office, and so that is the process that we've taken.
Thank you.
I believe that is the end of the questions. Thank you, Officer Naylor. Although you may be invited back to discuss some of the amendments. Yeah. So just process. You can see the amended substantive, and so that provides the additions/changes that I sent around last night. And what we will do at the end is provide the opportunity for people to vote for these or not if they like. But firstly, I will move the paper, and I think just to probably do a few thank yous, but just really wanted to thank LGNZ, Mayor Nick Smith and Campbell Barry for the work, and for all the panel for the work that they've done pulling this together. And also to thank our councillors for their input into the changes to get it to a place where hopefully we can all agree on most of it, because that's the objective here. And I also really want to acknowledge our great submissions this morning from Make It 16 and the Youth Council. It was so refreshing to be reminded of the why, and that we've provided the opportunity for Council to re-endorse our position on the Make It 16 and lower the voting age, and I'm really proud of that. And I also do just want to acknowledge our Democracy Services team, because I think from last voting, our last electoral period, they did, in my view, an excellent job of really reaching into our communities. They were very visible, and I was really proud when I walked down Manners Street just before 12 to see a voting line out the door and people, really engaged in the process. So I just want to acknowledge the work of our WCC Democracy Services team on that, and to bring the average up to 45.4, I think we heard today. But generally, I really do encourage you to support this. The general thrust are a situation that we're all experiencing at the moment, where we're really encouraging people to vote. And basically, all of these recommendations are about removing barriers to make it easier for people to do so. So please find a way to bring yourselves to support the submission, and I look forward to hearing the debate. Let me know now if there are any questions of the amended substantive, and we'll ask Officer Naylor to return to the table. No? That's great. Fantastic. Then we'll, Councillor O'Neill will second. Thank you very much, Councillor. Would you like to speak? Fantastic. Great. Now we move on to 5-minute adjournment. Councillor Abdurrahman? Certainly. We'll take that now. councillors. So we will resume where we were. So we were moving into debate. Moving into debate, is there anyone that would like to contribute? Thank you, Councillor Brown. That was your invitation. Handing over to you.
Thank you. Like everybody, I think I've struggled with the entirety of the letter, but I think it's one of those topics where you realise that there is always going to be a level of compromise in what is included and what changes we're advocating for. So, in the whole, I'm okay with the way things are going, and I'm okay with the amended version that you've come up with. But I have also put up my own amendment in respect of this issue around people on the Maori roll having ability to be able to vote in wards, in general wards. And this really arose because, and I don't think it's as materially different to what is actually proposed in the amended substantive, but I'll just elaborate on the changes which I've put forward. The background to this is that during the last election campaign, a number of people who attended meetings voiced their dissatisfaction with the fact that as people who were on the Maori roll, that they were not able to vote in ward elections. And they felt that in particular, they lived in Miramar, and they were saying, I'm really interested in what's going on over in my local part of town. I'd like to be able to vote for councillors who are connected with my area, if you like, rather than across the region. And I very much took that message on board, that I think that all electoral systems should create as few barriers as possible for people to be able to exercise their franchise. And I can fully understand also why people would want to be on the Maori roll so they can vote for the general elections for the Maori seats, because that is a completely different matter to local body elections and having local representation, and which is why we have a ward system rather than a sort of one size fits all across the whole city. So what I've come up with here is that our request to Local Government New Zealand would be that they look at this issue and they effectively promote whatever mechanism is best to enable people who are on the Maori roll to be able to choose where they wish to vote, whether it's on the Maori ward or on a territorial ward, if you like. Now, there are two ways I feel this could be done. One of them, and this is where perhaps I just have a disagreement with Michael and Jennifer, if you like. The two ways are these. One is that you should, in my view, be able to turn up to the polling booth, if that's the way we're going to vote in future, show that you are a registered voter under the Maori roll, and show your proof of home address and say, I choose to vote in the territorial ward. And so you don't have to change from the roll. You're still going to be in the Maori roll, but you've exercised your franchise in Motukairangi or whatever ward you happen to live in. And that way you haven't had to go through an elaborate process to actually change roles from one role to another. Because the alternative is which is I think is the current amendment, the amended substantive, is that the day before the election, or up until the day before the election, you will have the right to be able to switch from the Maori roll onto the general roll, so you can vote in the ward. And then, of course, if you wish to go back to voting in the Maori election for the general election, the day after, you're going to have to change. So, effectively, you've got a three-stage process, which I feel is just an unnecessary imposition on voters, and we should lower the barriers, if you like, for people to be able to exercise their franchise. So what I'm advocating it for is, ideally, I'd like people to be able to vote as easily as possible on whichever ward they would like to vote in, recognising, if Jen Parker is correct, that it's not practicable, then we stick with the switch the roll model as a sort of a second best option. So what I've advocated for here is essentially the same as what's in the amended substantive, but floating the idea of people being able to stay on the Maori roll and vote in the territorial wards without having to actually go through the rigmarole of roll changing. And if it's not practical, then at least the other option is the second best option. So that's why I put it up as it is here.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We have questions. Great. Officer Naylor and Officer Parker. Can you come to the table, please?
Thank you. And look, if mana whenua support this, then I will support it. But this is just me being a process nerd about just being, because the franchise is so important, that if people can just rock up with a piece of paper and go, is that enough security to keep the process really, really rigorous, if you like? So without changing, you just come up with your proof of address and you can say, well, I actually want to vote in the general ward. And it's just an administrative issue whether we should actually make it a formal, so it's really, really clear who is where and where they're voting.
I'll preface this by saying I run council elections and the roles are provided to us. So I'm not an expert on roles, but I'm really happy to try and answer your question because that's what you're looking to me for. So as I understand it, really, the electoral roll is an administrative tool that's used to maintain the secrecy of each vote and the security in terms of people not double voting. So for the bit that I get involved in, if somebody comes in and says, this is where I live, we say, you know your name, you can see which role it is, you pull out the vote for that role, you give that voting paper to the person, should they be special voting. So I'm not sure how I can see it working to have that flexibility in the way that Councillor Brown has expressed it. Certainly the first part works, the idea that they might, somebody might be able to switch roles up till the day before, that makes sense to me. I think I'm sure that the officers that worked on that, in central government and said that actually they needed that 3-month window, there were probably reasons around that. I'm not familiar with that. That's not my area. But I can see that bit kind of working in terms of time frame. The second part, I'm not sure how that would work from an administrative perspective. Yeah, which is not to say it wouldn't, but I can't. So yeah.
Were there other questions I'm sorry I might have missed on this side? Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I actually looked at this and I wonder whether this is tinkering around with the system that makes it more complicated, because if the electoral officers at these polling booths need to understand all these differences, then how do they actually substantiate and how do they actually get proof of things? Now, and I'll give you an example on that. Is that I'm not an expert on how these things work, but I was told that at the by-election that we had for Lambton recently, one of my constituents was queuing up to actually go and do a special vote because he'd lost his voting papers, and he said he had people in front of him and they went up to the librarian and said, this is my address in Karori and it's in the roll, and so the librarian checked the roll and said, this address is actually in Karori, so therefore you can't vote in the Lambton ward. And then he said that, but I'm living at Warehouse at the moment, which actually is in the Lambton ward, and so she said, that's okay, I'll give you voting papers. So how do we actually get the right information to the electoral officers taking this information? Like, do they just accept what people say when they come up? I mean, what if they're not actually in the role? Then doesn't that complicate it, or that?
So it comes back to that security. So every vote is then checked against where they are enrolled. If they weren't enrolled, if they weren't on the roll, then they wouldn't have. Then their vote couldn't have counted, because that's the system that happens. As I say, the vote is taken, and then that is checked by the electrician, to make sure that that is the correct address for that person.
Oh, I see. Yep. Okay. So is the system, would this be complicating that? Would that make it more difficult for the electoral officers to actually receive information that they can't check?
No, because what I'm hearing is that, again, I suppose to use that in that scenario, the vote would be received, it would be compared to where the person was enrolled to vote and, which role they were on, and then only if those two things matched would that vote count in the current system.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, my question is just particularly around the time frame with the day before. When a special vote is counted, when it is confirmed as a vote, it is checked against the roll present from the day before as opposed to, say, the preliminary roll. So in that sense, by allowing you to switch to the Māori roll at the same time period, you would still be checking it against the most latest up-to-date information that you would have for someone who may be moved wards anyway.
So you can change your address on the electoral roll up to the day prior, and then the votes are taken and they is compared to where that person's address is located. Yeah,
and is that compared to the roll as of the day before the election?
Yes. Yep. Yes. So it's So the prelim roll will close on 1 August or whatever, but then people can still both go on the roll and move between if they're not on the right residential address, not the other. Up to the day prior. So obviously in general elections you can do that the day of voting. In local government elections it has to be the day prior.
Cool, thank you.
Great, I see no further questions. Thank you, Officers Naylor and Parker. We will now move back to the mover. Do you have a seconder? Sorry, who was that? Yeah. Who was that point towards? Councillor Winera, would you like to speak now? Kia ora, then I open the floor to debate. Councillor Young, lovely, off you go.
So in case newer councillors aren't aware, I have a particular dislike of last-minute amendments, and particularly long ones. I'd just like to point out that Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address was 272 words, one of the most famous and clear speeches of all time. And so then we get this enormously long amendment from a councillor who once described me as one of the despicables, and so so basically, in essence, I won't be voting for this. It's too long and it's too late.
Would anyone else like to? Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, it is a long amendment, but I have had time to read it, and I just want to support Councillor Brown in moving this amendment. I do think that perhaps in the dark ages when the rolls were written on paper, it would have been physically infeasible to move someone's name from one roll to the other or send a carrier pigeon to Parliament to notify them of their intent. But I think now that we do have digital rolls, and as such you can change between geographical wards up until the day before, I do not see a valid reason in a logistical point or even in a moral point for allowing people to change between the Māori and general ward on the day before of the vote. And of course, the best way to get 2 votes in an election is to enrol yourself on the ratepayer roll.
Kia ora, Councillor Free.
I'm only going to speak to this because I would like to speak later to the substantive. I'm going to support this because I was also at the meeting where we heard how this has impacted some of our residents. So people who have been on the Māori roll for reasons that to support that kaupapa actually found they could only vote for 2 people to represent them, the mayor and one other person, whereas the rest of us would either have the option of choosing 2 or 3 local councillors and a mayor. And it just seemed very unfair. And if there is a way to offer some flexibility so people find they can be less constrained in who they're actually supporting, I think it's incumbent on us to actually make the point that would be a good thing.
Sorry, could I usually call the officers back again? Because I have a question about what...
I'm sorry, we're in debate now, Councillor.
Okay, I don't understand what the difference there is. That you said if you're on the Maori roll, you can only vote for 2 people, but on the general roll, you can vote for more?
No, this is in local body elections.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Councillor.
But maybe
we'll let the mover
can explain.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
Councillor Winera.
Yeah, actually, I can explain. So, the being on the Māori roll prevents you from voting for the northern, Lambton, eastern, western, or southern wards. Instead, you just vote for the Māori ward representative in that ward. So that becomes your local ward. And the point that was being made is that you get to pick the mayor, and you get a choice of sort of 2 to 3 people to fill 1 seat, as opposed to other wards that have sort of 3, 4, 5 options. reason that this is particularly tricky in Wellington is because we have such a low Māori population compared to, for example, cities up north where they have multiple Māori wards. So, for example, Northland, I think, has like 4 Māori wards that are geographic in nature and represent different geographical but also tribal boundaries. And so it gets a bit funny when you come south, where it gets cold and Polynesians aren't so keen. And there are fewer of us, and so there is kind of one ward to cover a fairly large geographic area. So that's when the current system of Māori wards requires a bit of looking at. So that's the point that's being made.
Thank you, Councillor Winiara. Councillor Brown, back to you as the mover for a right of reply.
No, I think I've said my bit. And I'd hate for, Councillor Young to feel that I was talking beyond what Lincoln spoke at Gettysburg.
Okay, so I will now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. So those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2.
Could I have a division?
I declare the motion carried. Well done, Councillor Brown. Great. So we now move back to debate. Do we have another amendment? Councillor Abdurrahman, would you like to move it?
Kia ora whānau. Yes, this is a last minute amendment, but it's short and easy to understand, and it makes sense as well. And the proposal to replace postal ballot with in-person voting is, to be honest, is misguided to the extreme. Postal voting is known across the world to increase voter participation, as was demonstrated during COVID-19. It is my understanding that many jurisdictions are opting to make the postal option a permanent feature in light of that experience. The last holdout in New Zealand, in-person voting, was in 1992 in the Hat. The turnout at the time was 25%. And 3 years later, about 30 years ago, in 1995, moved into postal voting. The turnout increased from that 25 to 45%, almost doubled. I'm not aware of a single example where replacing postal for other forms of voting has led to greater voter participation, nor is there any new evidence or research that contradicts the overwhelming consensus that the opposite is true. That is, the postal options make voting easier and more participatory. It is frankly remarkable that the group representing councils across the country is making a case against all available evidence and contrary to common sense, and this council is considering to support. It's a big puzzle for me. We can support innovation that provides additional means of voting, example, online voting, postal, and in person. But just getting rid of the one we have is not the way. Low and declining rates of voter participation in New Zealand local body election have much deeper roots and have nothing to do with postal voting. It is because residents have lost confidence in the power of their voter to affect local decision making. I think this time that it will change because they got rid of not voting so many times. Now they will be turning up, especially our young people as well. In order to address that, we need much harder discussion that this shall show about modes of voting. It should be going beyond that. We need to address, for example, whether the current governance model that we have, which is a corporate type, is the proper one. I wish local government New Zealand would lead that discussion rather than this misguided proposal that, if enacted, would be putting voter turnout in New Zealand local government into terminal decline. I think we all want to increase the voter turnout. If that is what we want, this easy amendment can achieve that. Let's support all types of amendment, all type of voter turnout. Thank you.
Are there any questions, councillors, for this? Question from Councillor Pennant. Who would you like? Of staff. So, Officer Naylor and Parker, please be welcomed back to the table.
This is a question for you, Jen.
Please, councillors, let's keep the focus. Councillor Panner, over to you.
So last time the issue of online voting was looked at, we did have a number of IT professionals coming to us and just saying it's not secure enough yet. Do you have any updates about where the profession is at with securing?
Sure.
If we were to do that.
Sure. So I'm on the national group that represents people that run elections through Taitoa Rā. We do, ask for updates because we would like to be able to expand. I think Councillor Durham's, exact wording is you're trying to make things as accessible and easy as possible. The central government maintains that it's not currently possible to offer a secure option. So that's something we ask for updates about, and they consistently shake their heads and we look sad.
And they're worried about foreign interference, presumably.
That's one of the issues.
Yeah.
Question from me, thank you. Just in the proposal, the reform that was put forward by the panel, what was the evidence in there toward moving from postal voting to in-person voting?
The LGNZ working group spoke to. I think compared to perhaps the trial from 1994, that there's been a market shift in postal voting, postal services since then. There has been the number of post boxes around New Zealand has decreased from about 3,500 in 2010 to 2,000. So there's less places for people to post those ballots. Postal volumes have absolutely kind of collapsed over that period of time, and so that was one of the main things, is that there was perhaps a feeling that while maybe that change is not urgent, there is kind of an inevitability about changing habits around postal volumes, and so that was something to get ahead of. That was probably one of the key reasons, and then the other key reason was that there was a sense that running elections in the same manner that general elections are held is going to hopefully be less confusing to the public. The public have a stronger habit of voting in general elections, and so doing that in the same manner may help voter turnout.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so we'll go back to debate. Councillor Abdurrahman, do you have a seconder? Yeah. Councillor McNulty, would you like to speak? Is there any further debate? Councillor Chung, Councillor Pennant later after him. Thank you.
I agree with my learned colleague over there in saying that I think that the reason why people aren't voting, why the voting levels are actually so low, is actually less to do with the fact that it's difficult to find a post box or having a form that's difficult to fill in, or other reasons that people give me for not voting. I meet with people very, very often through my 3 constituent meetings a month, and I regularly ask them, did you actually vote, or do you actually vote in local government elections and the general election? And the ones that come along now who are interested in finding out more about the local government elections, many of them say, no, I didn't, because the envelope wasn't a self-sticking one, or I don't like the taste of glue on my tongue, or a whole lot of different reasons that people give for not voting. But they also say things like, as people mentioned, I couldn't find a post box. But I think that voting is a democratic right for everyone, and I'm trying to explain to them, get them to understand that it's their right to vote, and therefore a little effort on how to vote is actually not arduous. And so I think that when we start looking at different ways of actually increasing the vote, yes, we want to make it easier for them, but really, when you explain to them what they need to do, it's actually not difficult. And I actually wonder if people who can't actually figure out where a post box is, do they even, are they actually making the effort to actually do that? Or are they just using that as an excuse not to vote? And I think that key to getting people to vote, to getting more people to vote, is actually in education. Educating them as in telling them what the effect of them voting is. And I am really buoyed when I go to these schools and I talk to school kids about voting and what importance it actually has for them. And I would say that out of all the classes that I've actually been to and talking to these students, I would say that if not all of them, then most of them in those classrooms would go out and vote if they once they had the opportunity. Because the key is education and what it actually means. It's not in how easy it is to find a post box or I want to do things online. It's getting that will to actually vote. So I support you on this, and I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chung. I'll just come in here. Just thanks to the input of Officer Naylor, I won't be supporting this amendment, but thank you for bringing it. Great, we'll move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pennant, that was an oversight. You were here. Over to you.
Thanks. Look, it's not the biggest deal amendment, but I'm a little bit unsure about how I'll vote. Look, I agree with the principle, Councillor, that we should make it as accessible as possible. But the online voting is not an option at the moment. We've heard all that. And the cost of doing postal voting as well as the booth voting won't be inconsiderable. So that's a little bit tricky. Councillor Chung, I just would like to point out, I don't think people not being able to find a post box is an indication of their intelligence. Like, these things have disappeared. Even the ATM machine at the beginning of Courtney Place is gone. Like, these people are taking away our access to services. So it's, it just because it's come here and we just don't know like how much it's going to cost. It's just a bit tricky, but I do appreciate the idea that you want to give as much access as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, I did have some points on this amendment as brought. I think it is important to reflect on the fact that when we are talking about moving to in-person voting, we are talking about moving to a process that is used for the general election. And for those of you who have been around when a general election happened, which I think will be all of us, you will remember that prior to that election happening, you do get things in the mail telling you that it is time to vote. You do receive notification through the mail that it is time to vote, and in some cases you even receive things like an easy vote card. All of those things mean that we are still involving the postal system in the election process. It just means that people do not solely have to rely on using what is a dying form of communication to cast their vote. And so I think it is important that we continue to look for ways that increase the accessibility of voting. And I think doing that through in-person voting, as demonstrated through the higher turnout in central government elections, is demonstrated by the fact that we have, as a council, put more effort into having in-place person voting, has shown that we have actually bucked the trend in many cases where other areas around New Zealand are reducing their voter turnout. We are investing in the ability to make in-person votes possible, and we're seeing higher turnout. So I think it is important that we reflect on that. Some of the other things that I heard in discussion was, particularly about against the evidence, and I think while it is fine to go back and discuss things that were looked at in the 1900s, I think it is also important to cast this decade view over the system that we're operating within, and I think that was quite eloquently elaborated on by Officer Naylor. I heard some other comments as well about sort of increasing the diversity of people who are able to turn out, and I do think that we see that through in-person voting, especially when the in-person voting provides for times across a wide range, whether that's in the evening, during the day, over the weekends, to allow everyone an opportunity to vote. I would also like to reflect on the fact that we are supporting online voting, particularly for people who do not have the means to cast a physical vote. So there is a possibility for people if you are looking at the accessibility of vote. As well as I think it's important to reflect on the fact that as a population we are now more physically transient than we have been in the past, and for that reason it is far easier to miss things that come in the post. And in that regard, we need to be thinking about what is the most effective way to communicate to people who are physically transient. And I think that means spending the money that we would otherwise spend on a postal vote on making sure that we do have the education, as Councillor Chung talked about, making sure that we do have the visibility of the election, whether that's through online channels or in our communities through posters. And so while I understand the intent behind this amendment, I do think that when it is put up against evidence that is produced in this decade and the changing trends that we are observing within our communities, I do think that as drafted in the original submission and as recommended by the LGNZ working group, the best way forward is to look to what we do in central elections where we do have a significantly higher turnout.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I mean, even though this is a late amendment, really a bit of an indication of the discussion that we never had around this whole submission. But I also now need to look at each of these things on their own merit, and I believe that this one has merit. I agree with Councillor Abdurrahman that why was options, for a submission that's trying to maximise vote, why you would remove a media channel that sort of runs contradictory. And I think if we'd had a proper workshop or something, we would have thrashed this out, and we wouldn't have multiple amendments to try and actually reveal the preferences of the majority of elected members. It's a painful process and totally avoidable. But that said, I do accept that this has merit, and I ask our councillors take it on the value of this. Thanks.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, I was loath to speak today because these debates get my blood pressure up at the ripe age of 36. But cost shouldn't be an argument in democracy, Councillors Panna and Rogers. Cost is not an argument in democracy. Straight up. And if that is where your thinking is, that, because of prohibitive cost, we shouldn't make it more open to democracy, what the hell? I mean, it's very weird seeing some of the Green Party out here talking about let's make democracy more restrictive. Where have I gone? Look, yeah, online voting, it isn't secure, you're correct, Councillor Panna, but we do, all the amendment says is to explore it, and we do have a mechanism for online voting for those of us that have lived overseas through general elections. We upload a form that's provided by the Electoral Commission into their through their servers, and we can vote overseas through the Electoral Commission's process. So I would call that a form of online voting as well. So there are options that sit out there. So I'm sort of perplexed. We're asking to do more and go further, make it easier, make it as widely accessible as possible. And the only argument I could kind of see for not wanting to do that is maybe that this would have the wrong types of people voting. Maybe we don't want to make mail voting easier because that might not be politically the types of people that we want to be putting a ballot into the green box. I'm not sure. Bizarre debate.
I'm just taking a moment. Thank you, Councillor McNulty. I do ask to refrain from calling political parties, actually. It would be really useful today, I think. Thank you. Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thanks. Actually, am I allowed to ask you a question, Deputy Mayor? My question is, I can't see any reason why I wouldn't vote for this. It just seems totally logical. So could somebody please explain to me why I wouldn't vote for this? I'm really struggling to work out why I wouldn't vote for it.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the mover. Thank you. Councillor Wineta.
2 points. One, it's a submission and it's going to be ignored. The second point, I agree with everything that Councillor Rogers says, except I think we should keep postal voting.
Fantastic. Right a reply. Back to the mover. Sorry, Councillor O'Neill.
Hi, look, yeah, I'm just taking a wee minute to get up to speed. I do, in principle, support the recommended changes to voting methods, and I'm really glad that you've kept that first sentence in there, and that this is kind of asking LGNZ to consider it. My understanding is that if we were to switch directly from postal to all in-person voting, that would end up somewhat of like around 3 times the recommended budget. And I don't think using money is a good argument, or good enough argument to deter opening more hybrid ways of voting. So with this regard, I'm really happy to support the amendment in front of us. Just maybe plea in future that a bit more work ahead of time could be done on it. And to signal as well, I actually looked into the online voting as well, but it's been vetoed by New Zealand Secret Service and the GCSB in terms of its conditions. So yeah, there's a bit of nuance there, but in the end, this is simply asking that LGNZ considers new, innovative ways to get people voting, and for that, I will support it.
Right, kia ora. Back to the mover.
Just to respond to a few of the questions, and to begin with, Councillor Roger, I was not going back to 19th century. I referred in 1992. That is 20th century. And I also referred to COVID-19.
Okay, so I also referred to COVID-19, which is not long ago. That is an evidence-based. For questioning about the cost, Councillor McNulty already addressed how much democracy costs, and that is the most important thing for me. If we can increase voters' turnout, that is what I want to see. I think that is what we all want to see, and this is a combination of way of voting that can achieve that. You also say dying form of communication, Councillor Roger, and on the other side, Councillor Panet also opposed the emerging form of communication. Dying form of communication, emerging form of communication, you don't support both sides. But what I'm saying is, let's do all of them. And when it comes to online one, I do understand it's a lot of challenges out there currently. That is why I included the word exploring. I didn't say implement it now. Explore the option, how we can in the future look at it. We can't look it out and just say no. It will make it easier for our young people, the voting, to increase the voting turnout. So let's take this in a positive way, and there is no intention of last minute move as well. I really need your support in putting this one forward. That's going to benefit our community. It's going to benefit everyone else. And I would also ask the same question. Why would you not vote for this? It makes sense. Thank you.
I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. So those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. Sorry? Yeah. Well, look at that. The debate had a change. So well done, councillors. But I would like to ask to keep our debate constructive and respectful. Thank you. Right. And now this brings us back to the debate of the substantive. Now, I am going to ask you, councillors, I think we've had good debate. So if possible, if we could move this along, I think it will be announced later. So at the moment, we have Councillor Chung. Oh. Councillor Chung and Councillor Free. Councillor Chung, would you like to go first? Certainly. Councillor Free.
The main thing I want to speak about is the lowering of the voting age to 16. And I think that the submission was correct to say that we support it, and that we have had a vote previously on council in which we did agree to endorse that, not by unanimous vote, but by majority. So for me, that was actually appropriate. I do support a lower voting age. I think, Councillor Chung, you said yourself you've been to schools and you've seen how engaged these young people actually are. And I think if we're talking about raising participation, the very, very best way to do that is to get people voting for the first time when they're young, and they see themselves then as lifelong voters. I know I voted first. The way the election came about, I was able to vote when I was 18. I have never missed voting in a single election, even though twice I've been overseas and have had to make quite a trip to an embassy to cast a vote. But for me, it's very important to vote. And I think that if we get to our young people when they're actually 16, they're still at school, they're supported often by their families. Some of those initial barriers about how do you do it, are able to be more easily overcome, and they cast their first vote and they instantly become quite engaged with the whole process. I think we can actually easily miss that opportunity by leaving it till they're 18, and in some cases they might not be 18, they might be 19, they might be 20, just the way their birthday relates to the cycle. And they're often in a complex place when they're in their late teens or 20s, and may not be such a priority for them to actually vote for the first time. And then when do they start to have a vote? So I would like to speak very favourably about actually encouraging our 16-year-olds to begin their participation. And as I've said, they might not be 16. That would be the very youngest. At the age of 16, you can drive, you can consent to medical procedures, you can work and pay taxes, you can actually leave home without your parents' permission. You can be tried in an adult court for any crime with the direction of the court. You can marry with the permission of the family court. And you can, I may have already said it, work and pay taxes, but at any rate, there's a lot of responsibility we actually expect of 16-year-olds. And to say that these people are not thinking is to actually question the other responsibilities we lay on them, and just look at the articulate presentations and the way in which those young people today, admittedly, I don't think any of them are actually 16, but they're not far off it, but the way in which they were able to rationally and confidently answer our quite complex questions, I think speaks for itself. I certainly think we're doing the right thing to be putting a submission in with the lower age of 16.
Thank you, Councillor Free. Councillor Chung?
Thank you. This is to coin my colleague, Councillor McNulty. I am torn on this decision because I was very, very impressed with the speakers this morning. I couldn't be more impressed with how well they spoke and how they articulated their arguments. And so, just listen to them. I said, absolutely, you know, we should. This is what we should do. If all our, and I'm not sure how old they were, but if all our 16 to 17-year-olds were as well informed as they are, then absolutely no doubt about it. But I spend a significant amount of time in my constituencies and talking to people, and I've asked them the same questions. So I said that the first time I voted for local government, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I really wanted to participate in this. And so I went through the little handbook and I voted for this chap that said he's going to clear all the sewage out of the harbour. And I said, well, that's a great idea. I'm going to vote for him. But of course, I didn't realise at 18 that I didn't even think to ask how he was actually going to go and do it. And how he compared to everyone else who had lots of other different reasons. And so I think I seem to recall he received about 300 votes because it was very impractical what he'd planned, but I didn't understand that at that time. And so now, talking to people, I'm very interested in, again, of getting more people out there to vote, to increase the voting feedback, the voting rate that we have. And so I talked to them about, if you could actually vote now, who would you vote for and why would you vote for? Like, what would you want in your Wellington? And so I'm getting answers like, oh, I want the council to actually make roads legal to actually do wheelies in and doing wheel spins. Okay. So, and then I'll get other ones saying, oh, I want more takeaway bars in my neighbourhood so I don't have to go too far. And I think that when I'm starting to get responses like this, I'm starting to think, are they actually ready to vote? Are they actually looking at what the issues are? Are they actually studying exactly what it is that Wellington does, that the council does, and the things that are within our I guess, our influence to actually do and not to do? And so I also, I'm very interested in money, so some of you may have noticed. So I'm very interested in understanding their financial acumen and their financial understanding of what it actually means if they come out with a list of things that they actually want. And
30 seconds, Councillor Chung.
Yep, we've heard speakers say that as students, this is what we want. These are the list of things that we want the council to be doing. But have any of them actually considered the cost of all these things and how we're actually going to go and pay for it? So I'm not convinced that they understand these things well enough to come out and add to the voting pool that we have. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm still not sure how I'm going to vote.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Chung. Councillor McNulty.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wasn't planning to speak, but just as the councillor on Youth Council, I do feel a bit of an obligation to speak up today. So apologies. Look, yeah, I am the councillor that sits on the Youth Council. They are amazing and they are actually a really good representative sample of youth in this city. There are issues that they understand better at this table than the councillors around this table. That is an actual fact. And they're not unusual. They represent a wide swath of our city. Councillor Free has pointed out the incredible range of responsibilities that we already put onto youth, and I'll return to that point this morning. What's more threatening, a 17-year-old in charge of a 2,000 kilogram piece of machinery or numbering a few boxes on a piece of paper? What's actually got the more harm associated with it? And then I'll go to a comment I just made in the last debate, because it just sounds like on Councillor Chung that actually it seems like some of his opposition to this might be that the wrong people will vote. Again, that, oh, well, if we expand it up, we might have the wrong people voting on that side of the aisle. And that's just such a terrible argument. If you have principles, you have principles. Left, right, up, down, black, white, I do not care. Voting should be as accessible as possible. That is just a fundamental right, and it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. It's been interesting, because this has been a debate I've had on Facebook this week, and having some people actually, without realising, calling for a poll tax. Oh, well, if you should only vote if you're a resident. Do you know why we had poll taxes? To stop women and minorities from voting in the early 20th century. To make sure that there were financial bars to entry for those people to actually vote in our democratic system. Yeah, oh, let's just have ratepayers vote. It's just such regressive, backwards thinking. And, you know, like, I hardly think myself that youthful, especially as I try and keep on top of what constitutes youth culture these days. But, like, the tide of youth is going to wash this away, and they're just going to look back in 20 years and think it's embarrassing that we were even discussing this point. So just support it. If you think that we should have democracy should be broad, and it doesn't matter who you vote for that you should vote, then support this submission. Kia ora.
Thanks, Councillor McNulty. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. Just really briefly, that I do think there is a need to have a coherent discussion about rights between 16 and 18-year-olds. I have found the debate a little bit incoherent. So I'm going to support this, and I have supported this campaign prior, but you know, why should you be able to vote at 16 but be able to drink at 18? I just don't find enough consistency. But nevertheless, I think the reasons have been compelling. I would just say, though, I do have close association with people of that age who are not political, and they tend to have interests like how much gaming time they can get, and the NBA draft, I think, was the big subject in our household last week. That was the thing, not who should be voting for who. But I think if we can get more engagement, and there's some amazing young people out there, and if they're given the tools to engage, then they are absolutely capable of doing so.
Thank you, Councillor Randall.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to be voting against this, and because this is quite a political statement, and it's really not, I don't think, while it's to do with local elections, it's really about, you know, trying to influence central government to change legislation and this sort of stuff. And we really haven't had the proper discussion around the council table. I mean, this is, as officers said, this came out of the Mayor's office and was put forward as the council position. And this is just not the right way that we want as a council to make decisions. Now, and it's quite different, I think, in my mind, to a lot of the other stuff that's, such as we just talked about, the seawall by the airport, which was considered core council business, which we've also had a robust debate around, but also with substantive officers' analysis, detailed reporting, and the presence of the airport as well. This doesn't measure up for the quality that and the openness that we really ought to, as a whole council, try and represent the position of the council. And we've seen this in multiple amendments come forward, which, you know, should have been straight up. I mean, what we put forward should have been agreed or not agreed, but at least in terms of discussion, we should have all had our chance to put forward obvious things. As Councillor Brown commented on Councillor Abdurrahman's, you know, it's pretty obvious that we should have, you know, got it wrong. So, and as you know, I think the political nature and I think to a certain extent a little bit of entitlement from the Mayor's office doesn't go down very well. I'm a little bit disappointed the Mayor's also not part of this debate, given that she came out early and said this was a key thing for her, and she's not here to put forward her views in support of this. So yes, altogether not very happy, and for those reasons I have to vote against.
Councillor Matthews.
I'd just like to be a little bit more constructive about the future and about the process that led to this submission, which was entirely normal, entirely appropriate, and has given us a good quality submission that we can make to local government New Zealand. And I would like to thank Michael Naylor in the Mayor's office. Nothing has been forced upon us. We have had a lengthy debate on this. We have had multiple submissions. The submission will go on behalf of this body if we vote for it. This is an entirely normal and appropriate process, and I mean, some of the little kind of personal jibes in this debate, including some of the amendments, are just, when we had inspirational young people come and give us the articulate vision for why we should uphold their rights. And the reason we as a council have a policy to do so came through the Children and Young Person Strategy, and it came very strongly from the young people of Wellington that this is something they wanted to see us as a council defend and stand up for. I would like to thank Make It 16 for their tireless advocacy on this issue. This is inevitable. This issue is on the right side of history, and as you heard this morning, countries around the world are supporting it. I have no doubt Aotearoa New Zealand will join them. I want to sort of circle back to Councillor Free's very good comments about this, and my daughter was one of those young people who was just a couple of weeks out, I think, from memory, of voting in the last election. So she will get her first vote in local government elections at nearly 20 years old. So vote for or against the submission as you will. It will be on behalf of this body having gone through an appropriate process, and I encourage you to support it and have our say and support the young people of Wellington who want us to do this advocacy on their behalf.
Kia ora. Councillor O'Neill, and then I'm going to draw a line under it so that we can vote quickly.
Mihi. So every time in history when people have fought for the rights for another group to be able to vote, the majority or other groups in the system have said no, and each time those people were wrong. This one's a bit wild, and I was going to list off all the other things that 16 and 17-year-olds can vote, so I'll just add the additional because other people have covered that. But 16 and 17-year-olds can even own a firearms licence. They can enrol in the Army, Air Force and Navy. They can, in theory, die in the service for our country. But voting? No, that would be way too far, right? And if you want 16 and 17-year-olds to have adult responsibilities, then maybe, just maybe, we should let people decide who governs the systems that these people are paying for and living in. Did you know, and I found this quite interesting as well, that in 2022, 16 and 17-year-olds paid $92 million in income tax. That's not pocket money, and that is 73% of all 16 and 17-year-olds who were paying taxation without representation. To the right of reply, I guess, around that this isn't council core business. If councils shouldn't have a view on who votes, then why did half of us get elected campaigning on greater democratic participation and councillors and elected members listening to the general population? We owe it to the next generation to let them help shape the world that they will inherit. And lastly, I just want to thank the service of the Deputy Mayor Phone, Councillor McNulty, several councillors around this table, and including the Mayor, for their advocacy and their engagement with young people and consistent engagement upon years and years and years to support this cause that also the position was voted on and endorsed last term in the Children and Young People Strategy. I recommend that my colleagues support this submission in its entirety.
Kia ora. Well, councillors, just to wrap up, I've got to say great debate, and so since we're all so interested and excited, I would like to extend the invitation to the Local Government New Zealand Forum tomorrow. That is not too late to enrol and bring all of our opinions there, because that's what it's for. But I do encourage you to support this submission. I would like to be there tomorrow to say that we have got something, got an opinion on this to be able to deliver to local government, the panel. So with that, we will move into voting. Can I just check, could we take them all as one? I see nods from the room, thank you. So, all those, do I have to go through the individual? Yeah, right. So I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded, so those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. Thank you, councillors. I declare the motion carried. We now move on to agenda item 2.3, which is the delegation of TRO 5-25 Wellington Central Motorcycle Metered Parking to the Koro Tōtōpū Long-Term Finance and Performance Committee. So please welcome Jennifer Parker to introduce the report.
Kia ora koutou. I'm going to do a brief introduction. So this is really just a paper to determine where you want this decision to be made. So there's an opportunity for council to make the decision itself, to refer it to the Regs Committee, or to go to the recommended committee, which is the Long-Term Plan Finance Committee, which would be the appropriate place if you wanted this to go to a committee of the whole. I'm happy to answer questions, but don't think you need more from me than the paper in front of you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? I see none. Thank you, Officer. Oh, sorry, Councillor Abdurrahman has a question for Officer Parker.
So when papers referred from one committee that is delegated to do the job to another one, what is the process looks like? Is that the committee deciding or the chair making a decision, no, this is too controversial for this committee, we're going to pass it to the next one? Or what is the process?
Sure. So, so there's a number of ways that can happen. That can happen during a meeting. It's quite a messy way to do it, but you can do procedural motions to try and move a paper somewhere else. Regs is a committee of council, so it's really difficult for one committee to refer it to another committee. The appropriate way is to do exactly what this is, come to council, and then council can make a decision for where that will be delegated, where that decision will be made.
So in this case, the Regs Committee send it to the council, and the council is now sending to the LTP committee. Is that right?
Essentially.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Just further on from Councillor Abdurrahman's question, is it appropriate for us to, on the Regs Committee, to recommend it go to the Long-Term Plan Committee, or can we actually have a choice of whether it goes to the Long-Term Plan Committee or the full council?
I'm sure you've seen in the paper that it's not possible for Regs to refer this to another committee. Council delegated the decision to Regs. If that goes back, it would go back to council, and then council can make a further delegation should they wish to. But what you're doing today.
But can we ask council? Oh, sorry. Can we ask ourselves whether it should be a decision that's made by us as in full council, or does it have to go to the Long-Term Plan Committee?
Oh, I think that's if I direct you to the recommendations in front of you, the potential resolutions is for you to make that decision. Yes, where do you collectively want that decision to be made?
Right, thank you. I'll now move, thank you. We'll now move the paper. Councillor Free will move, and I will second. Thank you.
Thank you. This is possibly a little bit of an unusual process that we're in, but our Regs Committee has a membership of 8, and we were tasked by the LTP committee to actually just decide how to charge for motorcycle parking. The amount that had been provisionally banked in our LTP was close to $1 million. We had submissions, several hundred submissions, and we heard a full day of hearings from affected motorcyclists mainly, and we actually came to conclude it wasn't a simple decision. Our views on the Regs Committee were very divided, pretty much 50-50 split, possibly even coming down to a casting vote, which would have meant that 4 people out of our council decided how to charge for motorcycle parking, or even if to charge for motorcycle parking. It seemed to us that given the public interest in this wasn't really a robust way to make a decision. We decided that it would be best to send this decision. Our own thinking in the Regs Committee was that it would be best to send it back to the LTP committee, who'd referred it to us in the first place, because any decision has some budgetary impacts, and we needed that committee to be cognizant of the consequences of any decision. So we are where we are. So I guess what we're just asking for is for approval for that process, for this question of how to charge for motorcycle parking, or if to charge for motorcycle parking, to go back to the LTP committee, where it can be considered robustly and in the context of the whole LTP.
Thank you, Councillor Free. I'll hold my right to speak. Would anyone else like to contribute to the debate? Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, as the Deputy Chair, I'd like to speak quickly on this. I'm not going to debate the merits of motorcycle parking, but I do want to add some more context. 1,600 submissions were received on this traffic resolution at 80% opposition. The Regs Committee has never seen such a vehement level of opposition to anything in this triennium. No cycleway project has come close. My view on this was that, yes, consultation is not the only thing that drives our decisions around the table. We balance a lot of priorities, but to have that level of unprecedented opposition, if we were to proceed, as someone that goes out to my community for the last 2 years, 2 meetings, advocates online and says, put a submission to council. Tell us what you think. If our decision in that committee was to implement this scheme based on the highest level of unprecedented opposition we'd ever seen, I was going to walk away from that committee because I did not want to be associated with that kind of decision making. That's my genuine feeling on there. So as we go into this, I unfortunately have a feeling it will get waved through an LTPFP, but nonetheless, I believe it's a more appropriate forum for us to debate it in that manner. But I would ask you to consider the social licence of council in terms of that level of feedback and that engagement that has come through from the community when we debate this paper as part of the LTP. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I also just want to make another important factor, I think, in terms of what the officer advice to us, to the Regs Committee. I'm not on the Regs Committee, but I was attended. And one of the things I ask is in the subsequent report to the LTP that officers remind us of the constraints and the priorities outlined in the parking policy, which essentially seem to, interfere or maybe it was out of alignment with this issue in terms that, we can't cap long-term parking fees and things like this. So I just wanted officers, ask officers in their report if they could also include some background around the parking policy and why the parking policy drives the recommended motorcycle parking. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
As being on the Regulatory and Processes Committee, I think it was appropriate to refer it up to either the council or the committee of a whole. I think one of the real challenges that we faced was we were tasked with hearing submissions and making a decision, but the underlying fundamental information justifying the change and the analysis around what potentially the income could be as opposed to the costs in collecting that was not as robust as it could have been or should have been. And I think that's one of the other reasons why we really struggled with this coming to a view, because we were almost starting to try and work out what was a fair price or what we thought, but the analysis behind the scenes was not there from officers. So I think this is why it needs to come back to the committee, and I would hope that the analysis is provided as part of this in terms of what are we going to hope to get for this if we implement this, what are the costs associated with collection of it, and linking that also into the parking policy, and that will hopefully help us make a a cohesive decision in the end. Thank you.
Councillor Chung?
Thanks. I'm also on the Reef Committee, and I was quite, I was impressed by the number of people who came in to actually make submissions on this, because I think that we're here to actually listen to the people who are actually involved in these decisions. And so what I did was, after that meeting, I actually went out on my motorbike and parked around at these motorbike parks in the city. And when I was there, I reached the people who actually came in to actually park at those places. And I asked them, we're discussing this in council. Nobody I actually spoke to actually knew about this decision that we were actually making at council. So a lot of people aren't aware of the things that we do. And so I asked them, if we actually started charging for these, would you actually still come in? And so, you know, what do you think about these decisions? So I wanted to get this feedback from the people who actually use these services. And I feel that after speaking to many of them, I feel that the estimated $1 million that council officers estimate that we would actually get in revenue was actually way overstated. And this is just from the feedback. Now, I'm always keen to actually get...
Councillor Chung,
yep.
we thank you, but you're debating the issue, and we want that debate, but ideally, we'd like to do it at the long-term plan committee.
Yep.
So this decision is about, can we send this decision to that committee to have the debate?
So all that feedback I received made me sure that we shouldn't actually be handling this. We should actually be deferring it to a higher committee, so that everyone knows about this decision. It's not just up to a small group of people in the Regs committee, and I agree completely with Councillor Free in actually putting this up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Great, let's do that.
Reply, so that's good.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Sarah. I can tell I'm trying to get some momentum. Would you like a right of reply? No. I think
it's good to emphasise this is just about the process at this point, not the substantive debate.
Okay, so I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. Thank you for your support. I declare the motion carried. Sorry. We've got a wee bit of a way to go. But what I am just going to ask, if we can move through this, we can then move into the PX, and then, no, we've got a couple more administrative papers, but if we can move through them quickly, then we can get to the stage where we can reassess how we'd like to proceed for the next period. So we are now, we have the decision register updates and upcoming reports. I would like to invite
Matt.
Oh, we're taking it as read, but Mr. Prosser, would you like to say anything in regard to this paper?
No, I'm taking the chair steer.
Great, then I shall move. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Rogers, is there any debate? Great, I won't, Councillor Randall.
Interesting, because I had a question.
Oh.
Already seconded. So I will just do it in terms of debate. I just wanted to highlight to all committee members there a couple of things. First of all, 22nd of May is going to be the big decision meeting, of course, for the long-term plan amendment and the annual plan. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with the water entity, and I hopefully before then we'll get some advice about what decision sort of thing we're going to do with the water entity, what it means. So that's just in terms of that. I think the other thing I just point out is, although it says on the 26th of June at the end of the financial year that we are receiving the report of the Long-Term Plan Finance and Performance Committee, we are also going to adopt, hopefully adopt our annual plan and adopt our long-term plan amendment. And so I just, I mean, these are two big decisions, and hopefully positive, and the fruition of all our public consultations and all our dwellings, I guess, on this. Thank you.
I can advise all councillors to get some sleep the night before. Are we happy to move to the vote? Councillor Calvert, would you like to add to the debate?
I would. I just want to draw everyone's attention, and I know this has happened, but I am concerned that we follow our council meetings for these next meetings on the 22nd of May. and I think it might be the 26th of June, pretty close to the long-term plan committee meeting. So it almost seems like a rubber stamping. And I do worry that we go to committee and then we have the council meeting directly afterwards, basically doing the same thing. So, and there's no break in between. So I would just raise that. I know it's been like it is, but I just think there is something not quite right. Thank you.
Would you like to speak?
Just that this is the normal process that has been followed by multiple councils that I've been a member of and is meeting our legal obligations to do that process and our own delegations. Thank you.
Great. So just in my right of reply, so there'll be no more debate, I do just want to acknowledge Lindsay McKenzie's in the room, so this is a good chance. If you'd like to discuss process with him, please do so. Great. Can I move the motion, which has now been moved and seconded? Those in favour, please press 1. Those against, please press 2. Thank you. I declare the motion carried. Okay, fantastic. We now have the report of the Koro Mātatini Social, Cultural and Economic Committee meeting. We will take the report as read, but does anyone have any questions before we hand over to the mover? Great. Councillor O'Neill, would you like to move this as the chair of the committee?
I move the motion.
Great. Do you have a seconder? Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Abdurrahman. Is there any debate? Great. No right of reply needed, so I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. I declare the motion carried. Great. Now we move into a public excluded. So officers recommend that the public is excluded from the following part of the proceedings of the meeting. So I'll move the motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Free. I was eyeing you up, Councillor Pennant. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we can, of course. Yeah.
What was it? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Do you have questions? Great. And questions from Councillor Pennant? So, no. Can I have the officers related to the public excluded process, please? That was Councillor Free. Great. Just checking on the questions list, I have Councillor Pennant and Councillor Abdurrahman. So I will hand it over to you, Councillor Pennant, for your questions of officers.
I think Councillor Abdurrahman was first. Okay. Mr Prosser, it's actually a question for you. This has been a long-running issue in this council. I'm just wondering if you could look at the possibility of splitting papers, which we have done in the past, but just to ensure public transparency of the issue, but keeping the finances in private. Thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. It's a bit of similar to Councillor Pennant, but the question is, the decision register 2.4 is a disposal of land, and what is the threshold to include whether it's ground leases or disposal of lands as public excluded compared to the one not, because we debated that one last time as well. And today it's not
public excluded 2.4, which is a disposal of land as well.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Abdurrahman, through you, Chair, could you just repeat the question so I can...
So, Agenda 2.4, today we made a decision, a recommendation from the Social and Cultural Economic Committee about disposal of land. That was not public excluded. And we are discussing as part of the public excluded a disposal of land as well. That's my understanding from the agenda item. So what is the threshold for something to be public excluded and not to public? Is that the amount of money they worth, or what is it?
I will let Ms. Parker answer that question.
Okay. So if you look in front of you, you'll see that there are the reasons for the resolution not being made public isn't about whether or not it's a disposal. It comes down to whether or not that would prejudice or disadvantage negotiations. So each item is considered by our legal team, and we can refer to them if you want, if you have a particular question. But that's the standard. It's not about, is this just, X or Y. It is for this particular instance, are there grounds to withhold on the basis that it would otherwise cause damage, essentially, to the council in some way. And that's the threshold rather than the type of transaction, if that makes sense.
I get it in specific for this one, but I want you to compare the two and tell me why that one is not public excluded example as well. What is the threshold? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Sure. We might have to come back, we might have to come back to you because we'd have to look at what analysis was done on the disposal from Tasman Street, who are officers that aren't in the room at the moment, because that was just a referral from that committee rather than relating to items on this agenda. But we can come back to you on the analysis on that.
Cool. My second question would be, is there any part of the public excluded agenda item that you are willing to share with public before we go to the public excluded, or is everything in that public excluded is supposed to be the way?
I might look at the officers on that. You'll see that there's that immediately following, there's that release clauses have been included because we've had time to develop those. Andrea, thank you.
Chair, Deputy Mayor, yesterday I committed to providing councillors with some information relating to item 4.2 that could be spoken about publicly after this meeting, and we would also look to make a media release. So I would give you the copy of that media release beforehand. The decision obviously is yet to be made, but once the decision is made, I think it's appropriate that we can articulate what the decision was that was made and what we are using and proposing to do as a result of that. However, we are still wanting to negotiate a commercial arrangement, and so we don't want the details of the commercial arrangement to be made public at this point in time. So we would certainly commit to providing information through media around the nature of the decision and the outcome that we're seeking to achieve.
Thank you.
So, Andrea, are you saying everything in the public excluded is public excluded, and the only media release would be the decision, which is not part of the agenda item? Is that?
We would include some bullet points that people can speak to in the straight after this meeting, and we'd also provide a media release. However, the proposal, as I understand it, is to also look to release this paper subsequently when we have found an appropriate point to do so and when commercial negotiations have been completed. So that's a typical process that we would follow, is to provide that paper, but we recognise that there'll be some immediate interest and we want to be as open as we can without providing information that is commercially sensitive.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. So with that, I'll move the motion and that we go into public excluded, and just draw your attention to notes 2 and 3, which outline what Ms Reeves have just outlined to us, so I'm trying to be professional here. Ms Reeves. And I have a seconder, Councillor Free. Is there any debate? Councillor Abdurrahman.
I do understand the importance of discussing some of the issues in a public excluded space. However, I think sometimes it is a way we can also rebuild back trust with our community and what kind of information we can share with them and what we don't. And I think as part of this today's decision, we are making a significant okay, I have to be careful, I think. So I think we really need to look at how we can communicate in advance. And even after, we are only communicating one of the ground leases as post-meeting, not post-meeting, actually post-settlement. And the rest of them, the community will not have much information because we are not directing officers to report or to communicate what happened with some of the ground leases or whatever we are going to discuss in the public excluded paper. So it creates a bit of uncomfort for me, to be honest, because not having that. And that means how do we know what we're doing sometimes is right, because we get it, a scrutiny from the community, people who got expertise sometimes say, oh, you're right in these areas, and we just go back and reflect and make our own decisions. So as Councillor Panet said, in the future is something that we really need to be looking at. I'm sure Andrea's aware, and she's been trying, as far as I know, to make it more open to the public. And I hope under the new CEO as well, those things can be reflected, and going forward, we can improve that openness with our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abdurrahman. Any more debate? Great, let's move through. So I'll now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1. Those against, please press 2. Thank you, councillors. We'll now take a moment to go into public